I remember the first time I met you, Max. That was in Vegas, which was 2017.
17,
Yeah,
yes.
2017. I was a yellow belt back then. I double checked, and we were in this big room where Huk started to like teach.
Yes.
I think it was circling the horizon. I'm not 100% sure because I didn't
It
know the
was. I
technique.
remember it was.
I don't know because I didn't know the technique back then, but I think so too. And we got lost back there.
Yeah.
It was with some other people from the academy, Frank, who's still here.
We were towards the right. I think.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
He had
And then-
the microphone, and then he couldn't make it go. so
Yeah,
he took it
exactly,
off.
exactly. And we started a bit, and you turned around and told us everything, and that was the first experience I had talking to you, not just being taught by you. How did you experience the Vegas camp, so to say?
Well, I mean, it was in general historic event. It was the biggest camp by far, and it was, it encompassed everybody from beginning to the end, so to speak, as far as the student base of Mr. Planas. It brought in the guys that started with him way in the old days and up to current. The latest students, the latest schools that came in. So it was very significant that it had both in the time frame and the geographic sphere. It was basically pretty much everybody from around the world. So it was, awesome because even in our case, it was a lot of guys that you heard about but never got to meet. So it was the first time all the instructors, all the brotherhood, the whole brotherhood came together and got to meet face to face. And, some of us had, like with Marty, I hadn't seen him in 20 years. So it was great to, and it was amazing. It was like we never stopped. I walked up to him and started, turned around and gave a hug and started talking like, we saw each other last week. So it was a very significant event in that sense that it established groundwork and brought everybody together. So we all knew each other. It wasn't just a name or an email, but now it was a friendship. So, in my opinion, it was very historic and very important, crucial in the lineage.
Yes. And many beginners like you were one. As a yellow belt, they think, man, I would never go to a camp like this. It's too huge. I'm a beginner. I'm a small beginner. It's too much information, but it's not right. It's a great experience for everybody.
My, Kenpo exposure started like this. I would go with my brother to seminars and, sit and watch. And, you don't get a lot of the technical notion, so to speak, but what you do is you get what there is to learn. And it should, in my case, it made me very excited. I couldn't wait to go out and train harder so I can learn it faster. You know what I mean? So to some people, it can seem intimidating and they back off. But if somebody's really, it's supposed to inspire people. Seminars are, for advanced guys, they're more, about material, about learning stuff. For beginners, they're more about what there is to learn and what waits for me there, So it's the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not just the hard work, but oh wow, I'll be able to do the cool stuff too, and learn the material. And I tell people, that I've seen, as yellow belt and blue belt and brown belt, and I say, hey, remember, this was impossible at one point, but now it's not. So don't think about in the past. Think about the future. 2 years from now, how much you'll understand. 4 years from now, if you keep up, because the knowledge grows exponentially. It doesn't grow linearly. So if you understand Kenpo, it should snowball, it should expand. And that's the beauty of it. If you really get the art, you never get bored with it because the more you learn, the more it'll open up to you. So it's in the perpetual refinement, as Mr. Parker used to call it.
Like last night, we had a brand new student, a white belt, attending your seminar in my school. And he probably was a little bit overwhelmed, but that's normal. He doesn't know what you just said. And a lot of people who start training Kenpo in my school, for example, they were unfortunate not to get to know Sifu Richard Huk Planas, who unfortunately passed away last year. And please, for those people, what kind of person was he?
The most important thing I can say is he was a genuine person. He was a very unique individual for many reasons. He was a man of many travels and many talents and many aspects in life. He was very knowledgeable in things he loved, which was music. He was very passionate about it. He loved the outdoors. and of course martial arts. Uh, he had a very, unique sense of humor that sometimes, like good wine or olives, you have to, let it grow on you a little bit. But if he liked you, you felt like, he was your dad, brother, best friend. And he was a sincere person. That is one thing I liked about him, that he would not, do one thing with one guy and do another thing with the other. As I traveled the world, I talked about people. He ate the same thing with them. He did this. He did not change based on the environment. He was a very genuine person. So, what you saw is what you got. Which in this day, to me, that's more important than somebody who tries to please you in every way, because that's not genuine. With him, he was a genuine person. He was, second to none in Kenpo, obviously, but he breathed Kenpo. Kenpo was his life, and he dedicated himself. He taught for hours upon end, and as long as you wanted to learn, he taught. So it was truly like a Renaissance man. He was very knowledgeable in a lot of things, and it was a pleasure. I always learned from him just as much off the mat about knives and guns or hunting, or not so much music, because I'm not a musician, but I loved when he sat with our guys and taught. I've seen him teach guitar to people, and even though I don't understand music, I understand the process, and it was very enjoyable to see people learn it and see his approach and how he explained it, because I could cross-reference it to other things. And, for me, even though, like I said, I wouldn't know anything about music, I enjoyed sitting there for hours and just watching. Just watch them and see how much enjoyment he got out of it, both playing and teaching music. He was a teacher at heart. He loved to teach people, and he loved when people learned and succeeded and became, he was proud of his students. There's people that teach but don't teach too much, so nobody ever, kind of gets too close and becomes a threat, so to speak. He was so confident, in his position that he didn't have to do that, but also he wanted to see students grow and succeed. You know what I mean? He wanted to, like one thing he said in Vegas, actually, that, kind of stuck to me and was very heartwarming. We were sitting there taking a break, and this lady comes over. I don't remember who she was. Says, "What do you think about this?" She says, "It's great." She says, "But you're not teaching. How does it feel to be on the back seat?" He said, "I go room to room and watch myself teach." Those were his exact words, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. To hear that. Because I think it also, for a lifetime of hard work that he did, it was his reward to go around and to see his legacy well rooted, and people teaching and training to his level of approval, and then that's another thing that makes Vegas so significant. So as far as Mr. Planas, like I said, he was like Kenpo. The more you knew him, the more you got to know him, and that's what I miss the most now. It's not like, oh, I wish I got to ask him another question about a form, or I wish I got to do this technique with him. It's just being able to call him and say, hey, guess what? I saw this knife, or I'm going to go fish, or I caught it, just to be able to, because he was like my dad. I would call him up. We spoke at least once a week, but sometimes more often than that. And he would call me up, hey, what you doing? This and that, just to talk, just to hang out. And not being able to do that is tough. But he was a friend to a lot of people, and he'll be missed. He'll be missed. And I hate to go on, but like Mr. Parker in his own right, he was like a star that was bigger than life. And when he went out, he passed away. A lot of people, same thing, were in the same situation. They never got to experience, who Mr. Parker was, but they stuck with the art. And there's other people that are, you can find the good ones, you can train, and you can keep the art going. And even though you never got to meet the man, you can, learn about him and learn the art that was such a big part of him. So with Mr. Planas, it's the same thing. Unfortunately, yes, there are people who will never have the privilege and the honor, but it's up to all of us, to represent that, to give them as close of an experience, at least on the mat. I mean, as individuals, we're all slightly different, but on a mat, to give them, that experience and to let them find out what he was and what he stood for in Kenpo and life and everything, his values by training. So that's, you kind of carry it on and let them have that experience. So,
Talking about experiences and privileges, the first time I had the privilege of meeting him, Sifu, I think it was in 2010, 2009 maybe, in Sasha Burning School. And I was shitting my pants, because I knew I'm meeting the man. He was like a god to me back. I was shitting my pants. And I will always remember, I entered that room. Ingmar Johansson was there also. And Sifu, he was lying there. He was taking a break. And I was like this, and I was approaching him, wanted to shake his hand. And the first thing he did, he was grabbing me, pulling me towards him, giving me a hug.
Yeah, he was a hugger, not a shaker.
Exactly. And people before, they said he's arrogant, he's cocky, and
I've
this
heard a lot
didn't
of it.
fit that image. And I was like, man, what's this? I will never forget this. And he was putting so much passion in that seminar, and he saw that I was willing to learn that shit.
And that's what he needed the most.
Yeah. And I saw that he really loved this.
He also, one thing that I kind of made me realize that I forget where we were, and but I think it was Baltimore, one of the seminars. We were hanging out, and he was not a man of compliments in a sense that, he would not sing high accolades and praises. So I always joke and say, "Man, he didn't say anything." I said, "Well, he didn't say anything. You're already doing okay, because usually it's, he would say a lot of, what was wrong with it. Then he would stay less and less and less and less and less and less. And then when finally, he'd get a nod or a pat in the back. And, once you go through that, then you appreciate the pat in the back.
Right, yeah.
But he did, I found that out as well, when I met his brother, around 2000, we were up at Jeff Blaze School up in Schenectady, New York, and he used to bring Mr. Planas and his brother in. So I made it up there for the first time, and I walk in the kitchen, and I see Huk, who's taller with hair, walking up towards me smiling, and I'm like, oh my God, who is this guy? And then, this has got to be his brother, but you've never met him, and you're expecting Sifu, and, here comes his brother. And same thing, I shook his hand and he just hugged me. He said, "You must be Max." He said, "Richie told me a lot about you." And I'm like, first of all, Richie, because, to him, just like Tom Kelly used to call him Rich or Richie, they're, longtime friends. So, like, you always call him Mr. Planas, but this is guys now, they're his friends, or his buddies, his brother, and I said, talked a lot about me. He remembers who I am once he leaves. Like, it was a shock. Because, a lot of people same thing, cold and arrogant and, non-emotional. And I said, and then as I was talking with him, he knew a lot of stuff about me. I said, man, he really does, talk about me. This is, good, and it's very rewarding because my father was like this too, My dad, the best compliment you got out of him, not bad, not good, but not bad. The Huk used to say as well.
Right. And at that seminar in Düsseldorf, we were doing Thundering Hammers extension. I clearly remember. And I didn't get it at first. And I was trying. And after probably 115 times I was trying to do it, and I did it, he was hitting me in the head. And that was his way, I think, to say, now you got it.
Yeah.
And I felt, okay, this is different, but this is the way I want it.
But it was never done with like you. A smack in the head, you can get very different vibes from.
Exactly.
You can get a very negative vibe or a very positive. It was kind of, or like when you took a while to get the answer, like he would tell you something and and you don't get it, and he kept pushing, and finally you get it, and like come on, you should like good, but try harder. And it was in a very positive. For me, I flourished in this environment.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No doubt, it was. You could feel the love.
Yes, yes. And what I loved about him is, again, he was very adamant about Kenpo, but he's not a micromanager. He didn't tell you how to dress, how to have things in your apartment, where to go, who to train with. He not controlling. A lot of people like to be there. This is the drill sergeant. You have to do this, that before you go there. You have to He was not like this, and that's what I liked about it, because he allowed for individual expression and freedom. He always used to say, "Go see any seminar out there, anybody." He said, "Learn it. Don't take my word for it. Decide for yourself. Use your own brain." He was very, big on that. And that is rare to see, because most people say, "Oh, no, you train with me. You don't train with him, or if you want to know something, ask me. If I don't know, I'll ask them, but you don't ask them directly." And that was never the case. That was the whole thing with the patch is, he used to always say, if you come up and ask one of my students who has the patch, the answer you should get should be the same as if you ask me, or very close to it. That was his exact words. He didn't want you to be a carbon copy, but he wanted you to understand and be able to answer and stand on your own 2 feet, and not say, "Well, let me ask Mr. Planas." He wanted you to know for yourself, So to me, he encouraged individualism and individual growth, where you did not try to move like him or sound like him, but you learned to move well and know Kenpo in your own right.
We're going to talk about the patch in a minute,
Yes.
because that's a very important topic also. Do you remember the first time you met Sifu Planas?
That was in Vegas as well.
That was Vegas?
Yeah. I don't think we talked about him before, but I saw the sheet where it was like the gathering in Vegas, and then you told me about him because I was asking. And the first time I met him was actually also in that room.
In that room, Max was talking.
Room, yeah. I met him before. I saw him before, but I never shook his hand or never talked to him before.
Do you remember what people said about him, or did you have an image about him, what he could be, and then how it really was?
Not before I met him. Afterwards, I got the same impressions, or actually the same words you two just used. That he's kind of arrogant. That he's kind of an individual, that he doesn't spread compliments with all that. And like you said, Max, after a while, when you get to know him, you never know him completely. That's one thing for sure, because he has so many aspects in his life.
Yes.
Like you told him, the music, the hunting, fishing, Kenpo, or generally martial arts. That was huge getting to know him. But when you get to know him a little bit, you get used to his compliments, so to say. Like you said, the nod. The first time I got a nod from him, I don't know when this was, I don't remember it, but I was so happy. I was like in my hand, that's saying yes, finally, finally, yeah, that's that. Finally, I got a compliment from him, and
very subtle, right?
It is very subtle,
but it's worth its weight in gold. That's what I told. That was how Huk was. He did something subtle that had a lot of meaning.
Exactly.
Instead of 100 words that don't really carry much weight, that one nod or a smile or that, or a pat in the back, like I said, was worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, and you always saw when he was turning his head with a big eye, telling you, now you're getting closer to it, and you knew, okay, I'm getting closer to the answer, or closer to what he's trying to teach me.
Yes.
And like you said, the one great thing about him was that he was the same with every person.
Yes.
He was not he didn't have a mask on him, talking to someone else differently or treating someone else differently. And that was also a big thing that I learned about him. Then you were talking about the off-mat moments.
Yes.
I think you even told me yesterday, or us yesterday, that this was the greatest way you learned, not only the art, generally for life. Maybe you want to tell us a bit more about the off-mat moments, because those are big, precious moments we all shared for sure with him. But maybe you want to take us with you with an insight about that.
Absolutely. So you were saying about the first time when you met him and the feeling. How old were you when you met him?
I think I was 24.
I was 13. So it was quadruple that, you know what I mean? Because you're a kid and you meet the president, you know. And everybody's like 3 rings of people, you know, standing next to him and closer, and you kind of like on the outside waiting for your turn. And like, oh my God, this is the guy from the videotapes and the magazines and this you hear so much
And
about.
like your turn to shake his hand.
And it was like, oh my, you know, like, where you're just one of 100 people, but to you it was like, oh my God, you know, the guy's real. You know, I got to talk to him, I got to meet him, and but I was not training at that school, so I, you know, I did it. You know, I remember it was a guy. He did broken rod. He did rod techniques. That was the first time I ever saw. Like I said, it was way above and beyond what I knew, but I like the precision right away. It's just the analytical breakdown. You know, it appealed to me. My mind works the same way, and I that's what attracted me to Kenpo in general, and Mr. Planas in particular, is that analytical structure. It just makes perfect sense to me. I like people. A lot of people don't like me for this, but I tell people in all my years of training with him, I never wrote one word down. I never videotaped. I mean, we did videotapes for, you know, memories and stuff, but it was just let it soak in and understand it. It was natural to me, and the way he explained the art was like it just clicked. It like a piece of puzzle that fits in. And when I met him and started asking him questions, the art all of a sudden just opened up exponentially to me. I was like, holy, you know, this is, it just felt right. And what impressed me the most is like you would have, you know, try to meet pretty much everybody who was who in Kenpo to, again, not just to say, well, I've been told that this guy is good. I wanted to see for myself. And some were very impressive as martial artists, you know, but as far as teaching what they taught me so my Kenpo could grow, Mr. Planas was that person, you know what I mean? And almost instantly, it was just that spark, you know, that I said, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to learn it. And I've told the story many times, but Mr. Trejo was around at the same time. And, you know, I came from a fighting sparring school, and this is how, you know, Frank taught. He was a very hands-on, you know, physical instructor. You know, he was very knowledgeable as well. But he, you know, he taught you how to fight. And I, you know, to his passing, I stayed very close to him, and that was, you know, he told me one thing, you know, because he introduced me to Mr. Planas. He said to me, if you want to learn how to kick somebody's ass, I'll show you. But if you really want to know how the system is put together and how it works, then nobody's better than Huk to do that. And that also impressed, you know, that, you know, he was a master in his own right. He was a big name, but he gave that credit. He gave that acknowledgement, which few people, you know, I found out would do. And that was very, you know, humbling to me as well. And that kind of, you know, he had my love and respect to the day he passed for that reason, you know, because he was a very genuine person as well. So he, you know, he encouraged me to go to Mr. Planas, but he also, I remember one day he said, don't be like everybody else. Don't fall in love with the theory and lose the martial aspect of the art. He said, at the end of the day, doesn't matter what you call it, doesn't matter, you got to kick their ass. You know, that was in the Trejo ways. He would make a fist, you got to kick their ass, you know. And it's true. It's true. It's an art, but it's a martial art. So the martial is war art, you know, combat art. The combat has to stay with it. And it's sometimes easy, you know, for the theory and all the cool stuff and all the, you know, I tell people, if it was just that, we could go to a cafe and have a coffee and do Kenpo there because, you know, just discuss it and lay out, you know, and understand this is this and this is that. But ultimately, this is just to get your brain in gear so you can go train right. The training part, the mat, the sweating on the mat is where you get the art. And that was, you know, what Mr. Planas was big on as well. You know, as much as he was into the theory and you know, that was just to get your brain to understand. You know, he used to always say, none of it matters if you can't do it. You have to be able to do it, and you have to be able to do it, in the heat of the moment. So it was very unique in that sense that you had the scholar and the warrior both present in the training and then the way he presented the art. And Mr. Trejo was as well, like I said, there's that combination. As a kid, growing up in the art, from being a little boy, that was a big blessing, to be surrounded by two of Mr. Parker's best and brightest. I was very fortunate. Was very intimidating at first, but I didn't, I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't stop. I was just like, a bad cold that just kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And I figured, they figured out they can't get rid of me. Might as well teach me something. But going back to what I just remembered now, it's funny, you get sidetracked. How I talked about meeting his brother. One of my students, got up to go to the bathroom, and she says, "Why don't you think Max is good?" And he says, I found that out later. He says, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you never tell him." He said, "That's right." He said, "Because if I tell him, he's going to believe it and he's going to stop working. I need him to keep working. I need him, he's good, but he can get better. And I don't want him to stop." And that was his mentality. That's, a lot of people think, oh, you never knew where you stand with him. To me, it was always clear where you stood.
And it was clear that he wanted the best,
Yes.
to bring the best out of you.
Yes, it wasn't trying to limit you or keep you, from growing to a sort. It was on the contrary. Mm-hmm. It was on the contrary, so he just wouldn't, do it all too much in public because then you say again, oh, he's the best or he's the best in that part of the world or he's my guy in this state. And then people start, it goes to their head. And we've had it happen before over the years. I've seen some people take it a little bit too hard, and whether they were or not good martial artists is irrelevant. The ego, the personal, feelings, start taking over, and then it becomes counterproductive. So, in that sense, he was a man of few words, but those words had a lot of weight. They had a lot of meaning, And
I think that's where people get confused when they say he's arrogant, because they're not used to people like this not talking too much and not like giving out compliments very much. But as you proceed, and that's just my opinion, maybe you got a different one. As you proceed, get to know him or working with him, you like appreciate the way he's doing it, because you always say, and that's the most important thing to recognize, that he did everything he did, whether it was a compliment or whether it was like criticizing you, he did it with love because he wanted you to proceed, he wanted you to get better, and he wanted you to understand everything that is on your way to get the better martial artist, not just Kenpoist, martial artists in general.
One thing I want to say, and as I've been traveling and going around, I have a lot of Kenpo friends outside of our lineage as well that I talk to. And one thing I want to clear up, we always call the Parker Planas lineage the gold standard. But I want to explain, where that comes from. A lot of people think, again, it's the arrogance that, oh, you guys consider yourself the golden boys, you're the best, and that's what, and this is completely, Mr. Planas never meant that in that way. He used to say, the reason gold is precious is because there's not a lot of it. Otherwise, it would be steel or lead. You know what I mean? If it was plentiful. So just like compliments, he used to say, who wins the gold at the Olympics? The very few and the best. That's why the gold is the standard for quality at the Olympics. That is the best, the gold standard. So that's where it comes from. It wasn't him saying, I'm the gold. He never talked about himself. He talked about training Kenpo and understanding it to the gold standard, to the best you can be, the best you can understand. And that's where the gold standard comes from. And, it has nothing to do with arrogance. It has nothing to do with self-embellishment. It has to do with working to the best you can be, which is, he used to say, what's considered the best athletes, the biggest tournament is the Olympics. And the best of the best get the gold. That's the standard. So that's where the gold standard comes from.
Right, yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, because a lot of people don't know that, and they think it's just like a cult, we're the gold boys, gold standard, and it's not about, naming that, and it goes with another thing you used to say. A lot of Kenpo people don't have a teacher because they already know everything. He was big in training and growing, and to do that, you need somebody who knows, who's qualified. Qualified instructors. He spoke about that a lot, and being able to take criticism. And again, it has to do with ego and the desire to learn versus just being happy where you are and getting promoted every few years because the time has gone by. So he was big on, growing and learning. And, he himself, was always interested in seeing other arts, other people do stuff. A couple of times I would do stuff. He'd come over and say, I really like that. Can I use that? And I was like, well, you taught me everything. You don't have to ask. You're my instructor. He's like, yeah, but I've never done it this way, or I've never said it this way. And, this is yours. This is now your accomplishment. And that was very humbling because all of a sudden the man that knows everything in your eyes and taught you everything pretty much, all of a sudden he was humble and he would acknowledge and say, yeah, but, I've never done it quite this way, or I've never said it this way. And that was very, humbling and very rewarding. And so you saw the genuine person that he was. It wasn't just, well, I'm Huk, and, take it and go. And nobody would question it if he did it. But he was, no, I got this from this guy, or I got this here, or I learned that from Dan. He would always give credit, where it was due.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on and off the mat. And you were asking about an off-mat moment. Before we got sidetracked a little bit.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of things as we're talking that I want to address.
And we got time. Yeah.
He was a large person in the sense of presence, in the sense of character. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things that I want to mention so people can get to, kind of get a better picture. That was another kind of stage, So what I mean by it is first you go to seminars. You get on the mat, nice to see you again. You go to train, Huk's usual, I hope you had fun. I hope you picked something up. I hope you learned something. Keep working at it. Nice to see you. Take a photo, and then you're gone.
This is like stage one.
Yes.
In the evolution of...
Yes. Of that, as I say, the spiral, to get to the center. Mm-hmm. And it should be that. If you think about it, anybody else you meet, you don't come up to a stranger and say, here, come, into my house and see me on my... we all have our... Where we take the clothes off, we also, so to speak, the soul as well undresses, and this is your vulnerable, side that a lot of times you don't show to everybody. It's human nature, not just Kenpo. So it's natural that, 1,000 people out on the street and workplace, in the bus, but you don't take them all home and they're not all your close friends. So it's nothing wrong with it, and but how you get to that point is through time. It's through time of being there and becoming friends, first closer, training, and not, it wasn't just with Mr. Planas, but it was with a group. We were all showing up to the seminars. We were all training. Then we said, okay, let's go eat lunch together. Then we, if we went to a bar afterwards, we'd all be there. So you start becoming friends.
Stage 2, stage 3.
Yes, and the second part, I remember they would, I always use my Cappies as, as an example, because Cappies in the 90s and early 2000s was where I spent a lot of time with Mr. Planas, and it was a big camp. Trejo was there. A lot of other people were brought in over the years. It was we did hours and hours of training. It was a good camaraderie. So it was an amazing time. On the East Coast, it was like the mountain camp they used to have in the California. Was the equivalent. It was they had the bonfires and the music and the party, and it was the same thing on the East Coast. So I always referred to it. We would go to Cappies, and you got in Friday night. Mr. Planas taught a seminar. Then we train all day Saturday. Then there was a big party for everybody who was there. Then Sunday we wrapped up, and then Sunday night, the instructors and the few close people went home and had dinner, was the party, later I found out because, and you just kind of, everybody leaves and they would, you knew about it, but, only those guys went. Until one day, you keep showing up, and somebody walks up to you and says, hey, you coming with us? You're like, wow, yeah, come on, let's go. Don't tell but you get the nod, and you get and you come over, and that's your all over again, because now you're on the inner circle, and you get to see these people in a more private environment. And for me, it was great, because that's where a lot of the Kenpo story, that's where the extra credit came in, not just the how to do thundering hammers or how 4-4 goes, but now the history, the story. Like I said, it's just a whole different world opened up. And then the third is when I started bringing him in, and he would stay at home, and I would get him for a whole weekend or a week sometimes, where we, went, there for a whole week. We ate together, we did stuff, we, hung out, and we started finding out what he liked besides karate, and then doing it with him. And again, as you become closer friends, you share more stuff, you find out more things about each other, the childhood, about this experience, that experience, what, shapes you as a person. So it was like an onion, you get to the center. With each time you got closer, you learned different things about, each other and about a person. And that's how that's like anybody else, that's how you become friends, been through it thick and thin. And then when we started traveling together also, because now you're on the road, and you're, teaching seminars, and all of a sudden, you're like, hey, what do you want me to teach? What you don't want me to teach? What are we going to do? So I come up with a game plan, and it was just, a phenomenal experience. I'm very glad, like I said, I started early on, so I could have good 30 years just about with him. And it's like winning, like going to, like you say, you're going to Disneyland or going to Disney World for a kid, is the greatest experience. So for me, that was the case. And off the mat, that's what I was telling the guys. I said I probably learned more, had more classes, because I never missed an opportunity. We'd be sitting at the restaurant, I would remember something. Oh, say, what about this? I just thought about that, or And I can't tell you how many times, we were in my restaurant one time, and somebody asked them about Wings of Silk, and sure enough, they got up, and the whole bar is full of people sitting there like, what's going on? And he's out there stumping and this and that, ripping. And, when he would, you asked him a question, it doesn't matter where you were. You could be in the movies. He'd get up and show you. So.
Right. Reminds me of 2022, I think it was, in L.A., when he came over, Tony. You remember? Very special moment.
When he met, when we were at the academy.
Tell us
also,
about
right?
this, yeah.
Was it 22? I don't remember the year. It doesn't
23?
matter.
I think it was 23.
It doesn't matter the year, but it was a very special moment. For me, totally overwhelming. I don't know about you, but
Absolutely.
you told me
Absolutely.
a bit about it. I just don't want to speak for you. We were at the Inosanto Academy. That's what you're referring to. And the meeting between Huk and Dan, I mean, for me, it was like I zoomed out. I was like somewhere else, because it was like this two big people coming together and appreciating each other. Yes. For me, it was a very humbling moment to see both of them.
It was a historic moment also. And we didn't know in the beginning that Sifu was coming over. Yeah. We were at Marty's house.
I remember
Marty
that,
said, oh, Huk is going to come next week.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is going to be.
He was at JR's. I think,
this is going to be special.
They brought
yes.
him down, yeah.
And I think the seminar didn't take place as they planned it for whatever reason. I think there was something going on in town, and they had to skip the seminar, whatever. Right. I don't remember. And then they came over, Armin and Huk.
Yes.
To Marty's.
Yes.
Yeah, that was special, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't have words. I'm sorry. I cannot really express how this was.
But that's an off-the-mat moment also, having dinner afterwards with Benny Urquidez' brother, Smiley, and Sifu Marty, of course, always great. Yeah.
Oh, well, Marty, I met him in 98, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was either a fourth or a fifth degree back then. But, we heard about Marty, and, he had the patch. And that's what, going back to the patch, kind of like, it was like the elite special forces. And
what's this patch thing all about now that we Use the word again.
Well, the patch, Mr. Planas had that, he used to express his discontent with the belt system and how it got out of hand and abused, where people were getting way more rank than they had knowledge to back it up with. And he used to always say, Big Kenpo's biggest problem is it's got more students than qualified instructors to teach him. And everybody is a teacher these days, whether they know it or not. So he first made that patch just as a lineage badge to designate his, line. And eventually, based on recommendation of one of his senior students, it became a merit patch where he was told, he said, hey, why don't you, have people test for it and, earn it with merit instead of just by hanging out. And then the rest is history, so they say. So,
And just to make it clear, it's not the big patch on the back. For those people who don't know.
Well, yes.
This is the sleeve patch.
There was no big patch and there was no chest patch. It was just originally only the patch. The rest of them came way later. The patch was a nod of approval. That meant that you worked with him as a direct student from the beginning, or worked up to that level and worked through the system, and earned the status of a direct student. And not only that, but you earn his stamp of approval of understanding and teaching the system to satisfaction. And, we just had a lineage poster put together to show all the individuals over the years, which is not many at all. It's under 36 in over 50 years of teaching that earned that, distinct recognition. And it's based on merit and knowledge and skill. This is not something you just get by hanging out. He used to always say, it could be my brother, I'd fail you if you didn't know it. This is something you had to bust your ass for many years to earn. There's no other way to get it. So after that, when there was an access to a sewing shop, they were able to do the embroidery, and we started putting the big crest on the gis, and that was again like the lineage instructors, originally the black belt guys in the lineage, but that was not related to the patch as far as merit. That was just meant you were a black belt actively training in lineage. The shoulder patch was always a standalone thing. Then even later, when the issues started becoming with the IKKA crest and who could wear it, who couldn't wear it, the people said, well, why don't you make your crest, that? And at first I was kind of, because they started making it big and smaller and, even smaller for like the bags and stuff. And I guess it doesn't matter, but to us, where that little piece of, cloth meant so much, now seeing it, mass produced for be put on gis and jackets and everything, I wasn't crazy about it, but then he said, don't worry about it. People who, want to wear it as a gi crest can. And it came around Vegas. It came in, 2016, 2017. It was way, way, way later. The original patch was put together in the very early 90s. That was when that came about. So, but yeah, basically, it's few and far in between, and people who got them worked for it and had to learn the stuff. There's no other way. And you had to spend a lot of time with him, in front of him, and with him directly to get that. So that's basically in a nutshell what it is.
Mm. And that lineage poster, that patch holder poster you just created, tell us a little bit about this. What's this all about? That list of patch holders and that poster you created.
Well, we always go back to the original Parker family tree, which was released in 1982 when the first book came out, Infinite Insights. That family tree was included in the book. And from talking to Mr. Planas and some other Kenpo seniors, there was a notion that for many reasons, which I don't want to get into too deep, but there were more people on it than needed to be, as far as how much they really studied with Ed Parker and how much time they spent with him. But not to leave anybody or hurt anybody's feelings, pretty much everybody got put on it. So many, many years later, and especially even amongst the patch people, you kind of knew there's not a lot of them. You knew there's a handful, and you knew who the main guys were. But nobody that I talked to knew all of them. And even Mr. Planas, if I said, here, write them down, he would have to think about it. And then we find out that there were a couple of guys that trained, but then had moved on or passed away, that, you would eventually remember. It's not that he was trying to forget somebody, but, if somebody says, here, write a list, you probably miss somebody. So I said, well, we ought to write it down and verify it, with all of us who knew who. And first he was like, no, we know who they are. It's a small list. But then I convinced him. I said, it's always better to have it in writing, verify it and prove, proven than do hearsay later. So he said, okay, well, you do it. So I started, speaking with a lot of guys around and say, hey, who do you remember? And then started doing a list, a verified list. And then it took a little bit of a back burner until Mr. Planas passed away. And then I said, you know what? This is kind of a major milestone because now, he's not around, and the patch, again, was his thing. I've spoken with him many times. He said, I want the legacy to go on. I want the teachings to go on, but the patch dies with me. You only get it from me, and if you don't get it from me, then you cannot get it. You get it from other people. They can call it other things, but it's not going to be the patch. He said, that is my thing. So I wanted to kind of, at his passing, to do a final recap and a tally of who the individuals were that achieved it. Some of them moved on to other arts, endeavors, lineages, but, I felt that if you did the work and you achieved it, then you should have been on it, regardless of where life took you. That's fair, because it's like if you go to college and you get a degree and then, you don't pursue that field, and 40 years later, you still have that diploma, you still did the work. It doesn't discredit, you're not active, you're not eligible to just become a doctorate all of a sudden 40 years later because you have that degree. But at that point, you met the requirements to get that, and you should be on a list. So I worked with all of our guys. We, when we were in Grass Valley last November, we all went through it, and you do end up missing a person here or there, sometimes completely, the most known ones, because you don't, you kind of presume everybody knows, and you say, oh, we forgot to write this person and this person. So after going back and forth, we got a list together and, cross-verified it. And I had Ed Parker Jr., Mr. Parker, his son, who I've known for many, many years, and he does phenomenal work for, in general, artwork in general, but, and especially in the Kenpo field, because he knows the individuals and he can really portray and get the essence of each individual he draws, I feel, because of not just being an artist, but knowing them personally. I think that gives it that special touch. So when the time came, because I didn't want it to be just a typed up piece of paper. Everything Mr. Planas did, he did with class and style. It was always aesthetic. All his certificates had meaning. So I wanted it to be, represented in that poster. And that's why, again, I asked, Mr. Parker to do the artwork, because he knew Mr. Planas. He grew up around him. He knew him very well. And together we had discussed the symbolism that was important, and he did a phenomenal job. Should be being wrapped up and printed right now, and I'll distribute it to all the guys in the lineage. It turned out great, and it has just as much, like I said, class and aesthetic, values as it does content. But it was something very important for me to do to, again, kind of at that point of history, at Mr. Planas' passing, to do a final tally, because, again, per his wishes, the patch is to be done and retired. So I wanted to see, and I wanted to acknowledge all the people, and also to prevent, future, untruths being told where, oh, I had it, or, I forgot to tell, or he didn't tell, or, no. If you were around, you did it, you're on the list. And if you're not, then you weren't. So that's basically the reason for that.
So if someone wants to do or get the patch nowadays, he doesn't have a chance, or is there any idea of a new patch, something like this?
Yes and no. So again, in the purest sense, there is no way to get a Planas patch because Mr. Planas is gone, unfortunately. And again, per his direct wishes, that was retired. But we had thought long and hard about individuals that were in the process of doing the work and had the sincere intentions. It just started later and did not, have the time to pursue that to the end before his passing. So to be fair to those individuals and to allow future generations have something of a high standard to achieve, because the patch was always above and beyond. That's one of the things, and that's why I wrote that out on the certificate. It was way above and beyond the norm. That's what, his words were. That it was the, like he always used to say, these are the minimum requirements for black belt or blue belt or whatever belt. He said, now the patch is not about the minimum. It's not maximum, but it's way above the norm of what it would take. He used to always say, a patch represents getting a black belt in Pasadena back in the old days when he was teaching there. But, he wanted way above the norm. So we created a legacy patch, which is similar to it, but we added the word legacy to it to signify that this is done after Mr. Planas' passing, and it's not done by learning it from him. I mean, maybe in part, but not, the whole thing, because it's impossible, obviously. But it has to be, the criteria is that it has to be from somebody who has the patch to nominate a student, because obviously you have to have done the work and know what it takes. And then it has to be at least 3 patch people as the board to certify that person. Because again, when Mr. Planas did it, he was the final word, like Ed Parker. He said yes or no, and that was good enough. None of us is Mr. Planas. We established that, after he passed, there will never be another Huk Planas. It's just, he was a very unique person and very knowledgeable person, and we all have big shoes to fill, and we're all going to keep doing it, but nobody has that authority on their own. So, I suggested that we do a board of at least 3, and that way, it's not just, can never, and it's more to protect the individual. So we don't say, oh, well, you're, his brother, or you're his buddy, or you're play pool together, and that's why he gave you the patch. By doing it as a board of 3, it cannot be just favoritism.
Three patch holders.
Yes, 3 patch holders from the original tree, from the original list, from the senior council. So I have to be high-ranking black belts, and patch holders to certify that. You know what I mean? And that gives it credibility. So it's not Mr. Planas' patch. It's not Mr. Planas, but it's the closest we can get to it. And it's, again, for people to, who, like you said, the white belt that didn't get to meet him, but, in 5 years, sticks with it and really, shows growth and wants to have something to work for. It's important that we have that opportunity. So it's not going to be a Planas patch, but it's going to be something of a very high standard that we will offer. So that's the plan with it, for the legacy patch.
Right. I'd like to zoom out a little bit before we got to wrap it up. Unfortunately, there's so many things to talk about that we don't have enough time. But you've been doing Kenpo for many years now, Max.
All my life.
All your life. 30-something years.
Yes, 34, since I came to 1992, 34 years now.
And there's like 3 different generations at this table, right? And I'm interested in, and I want to ask you and you, Tony, also, why do you still do Kenpo? Why do you teach it? Why do you still love it? And this is especially for beginners or people who want to train, who want to do martial art. They maybe never heard about our art, about Kenpo. Why do you still train and teach it?
It's funny. My father, before he passed away, and he knew Mr. Planas, and they were, friends. I would bring him over a lot of times after the seminar, and we would, have a cookout, and they would talk, and I would enjoy the conversations because they were both like my father figures, and they would compare notes and just, see how they grew up, because we grew up, halfway around the world in a very different country, but it was neat to see two people from the generation, and they were a lot more closer than they were apart, and talking about their young days as youngsters, fishing, hunting, so it was a great experience for me. But he asked me that. He said, don't you get tired of doing the same thing, Max? He said, the same karate, same techniques, and it can seem that way. But the more I do it, more to the contrary of it is. I love Kenpo more now than 20 years ago, for many reasons. One, if you truly get the art, you never get stagnant in it. Mr. Parker used to use that, infinity formula, as Kenpo approaches infinity, the number grows exponentially, where, he used to just do that with variables. But it goes with the art in general, that there's so much to learn that there used to be a saying that one lifetime is not enough for anybody, So to say that you've mastered it and you learned it, I think you really don't get the art, because there's always room, to grow. Another thing is the camaraderie, the friendship that you develop over the years. That's what Mr. Planas used to always say. He said it's not just about going to see Chris or go to see Max. It's a reunion of friends, seeing everybody, having dinner, breaking bread, having a drink afterwards, what you've been up to, the fish you caught, the hunts you've been on, the music, whatever it might be. But it was like a family reunion. It was like what people say, like during Christmas, the family comes together. Well, Kenpo camps is our Christmas, and
luckily different times of the year, many times of the year.
Yes, that's what I said, much more than just once a year, every time we get together. Mm-hmm. And the third, it's now seeing people grow, being able to teach and influence people. And now I remember the excitement of learning the art and getting better in it and getting, like I said, the nod of approval. Now you're in a position to pass it on and teach it, and seeing the beginners, that light come on, that spark ignite. That is very important too, because now you're, as the ranks get higher, it's not about how well you can do 5 swords or what you know about 4 and 4. That should all be established by the time you get to professor ranks. That's why you have 4 instructor ranks, to learn how to be a good instructor and how to understand and teach the system. The rest of it is service to the art. As a professor, it's a college level designation. Mr. Planas used to always say there's no kindergarten professors or high school professors. It's university and higher, higher education. So you have to teach on a higher level. If you're only teaching a beginner class, which is nothing, I love teaching beginners, and you learn a lot because you get a clean slate. Sometimes they don't have predispositions; they just ask you, and some of the stuff is very good because they see it from an outsider. They don't have anything that they have to think a certain way or not. They just ask you based like a little kid. There's no filters, which is good, but. Once you get up higher in the rank, your service to the art, teaching and traveling and spreading the art and being, supporting the people coming up. I was telling somebody, I forget who I was talking to in Grass Valley, I said, when we formed the senior council, it's an odd number of people, and basically like the highest ranks that we have in the lineage. And from everybody, I'm the youngest one on it. Because what just happened, I started very young. So, like by rank, I belong to one group, but then by age, I'm a lot closer to a lot of other guys that like yourself, like David, and to me, I feel like it's a very good, position, because I want to be able to, to be like the bridge between the one side and the other. The older guys that are, sometimes like, oh my God, that's Marty, or that's Chuck, or that's and you're like too afraid to come up and ask, and to be able to say, oh, no, they're approachable, they're out there, they're don't be reach out if you want to train with them, also to speak to the we have a lot of younger talent that are coming up, and that some got the patch, some didn't, but tremendous martial artists, and I always want to consult with them before making votes, so to speak, for the lineage, because I want to make sure they're not left out as well. It's not just about saying, okay, well, we're the top, and that's what we're going to do, and well, you have to consider who you're doing it for. We've been there, done that. We can keep it as it was, but you have to, as the times change and new people come in, you have to make sure, again, they have access to training, especially with Mr. Planas gone, about going to seminars, about networking. And if I can, use that to make these bridges happen and start new relationships, I'm very happy to do that as well. So that's another goal of mine that it keeps me from getting bored in the art, so to speak, is make sure the legacy and the lineage is there. It's it's alive. We don't want to just be a family on paper. We want to be that way in life on the mat. So it's very important. I try to do my best to coordinate and promote and support. If somebody is having an event, to find out about it, to support it, and to just keep the network going, because it's very important for us now more than ever. With Mr. Planas gone, that we are all on the same page as far as love for the art. I tell people, so he wasn't that person, so none of us would try to be, you have to have your charts go this way, or you have to teach this first, or this. This is not about nitpicking. This is more about, again, the gold standard, maintaining that high standard of making people work for it and wanting to get better. And that's what we have to keep going. So that's very important, and that's kind of part of what keeps me stimulated and what keeps me going after all.
No. What I love about this is the mindset of the service aspect. It's a service to the art,
of course,
at a certain rank. And this is a commitment. It's a responsibility also.
Very much so. You take the rank, you have to profess. Like I tell people, you accept the professor rank, you have to. Now, certain people, have a school. Certain people don't have a school. So there's obviously limitations. If you're in a different business, you cannot be teaching 40 hours a week, because you can't. But you have to do what you can, within reason, but you have to, make yourself available to people who want to learn, and again, promote the art and promote the lineage, and the service part. Yes, it's not only like the old saying, not only your country can do for you, but you can do for your country. It's the same thing with the art. You have to invest back in it, just like a healthy company or business organization. You have to do your part, not just take, and take, but now you have to make sure that it survives and it grows and it improves, because that's what Mr. Planas always did after Mr. Parker's passing. And I feel now it's very important that we continue on the legacy,
right,
in a similar fashion.
Absolutely. Now, how about you, Tony? What keeps you motivated practicing Kenpo and teaching, meanwhile, also?
Well, what impressed me now while I was listening to you is I got the same aspects he was talking about, but I'm far more behind, obviously. And this is what is so interesting. And I don't mean it in a negative way. It's actually a positive way, because I don't know what I don't know, but I want to get there. And this is so interesting about it, because you learn about the art every day or every minute you're talking about it. I like the family aspect actually the most, because one is the family you grow up with, and then is the family you choose.
Yes.
And I think the Kenpo family is one that we all chose.
Yes.
And this is so beautiful. And I like also the aspect you told, or you both actually talked about it, that our gatherings are our Christmas.
Yes.
I never thought about it that way. This is very beautiful. So,
and somehow the family chose us also.
Yes.
We
Kinda,
chose
yeah.
the family, but I think somehow we got chosen.
Yes,
by
into the family. Yes,
Right.
you have to kind of get that nod of approval. That's the
Yeah.
whole thing,
Right. Yeah.
I like this unstoppable growth, so to speak. So you, like I said, you learn every minute. You talk about it, even though you heard about it already. You're still learning something. And there was this one sentence I heard the first time. I don't know, was a color belt, I think. And they said a black belt is just a baby in diapers. I was kind of offended the first time I heard it, because that was my goal back then, obviously. Yes. As a blue belt, it's your goal to get to black belt.
Offended in what way?
Because I thought, I'm putting all this effort
to become a baby.
To become a baby. But now I understand it. Now I understand that if you come to that level, you have seen most of the art, at least you have seen all the techniques, and then you restart with everything and look at it complete in a different way. And I think it's about this every rank you go through, that you restart not from the beginning maybe, but you restart like looking at this aspect differently. And what I'm like about it is that I can take this knowledge or this teachings into life, because it's the same thing in life. You get to a certain point, and then you start looking at it. When you look perspective, you start looking at it differently, because you learn something new, because you're like mastered in kind of way. You get black belt in one aspect of your life, and you start to get white belt in a new one. And I like that, and that's why I still keep going. That's why I still want to keep going, because I want to learn, and then seeing the people I teach now, at least a bit of some of them, start to grow kind of with me. Like Huk said in Vegas, how did you say it?
I go around from room to room watching myself
teach, and that kind of clicked, because I see sometimes students in our academy,
brown belts in this case.
We're thinking about the same situation right now, where we both looked at each other and nodded and just smiled, because those are kind of our words put into that mind of the brown belt, and then teaching it in his words. And this is so beautiful to see how it goes through the generations.
Mm.
And talking about generations, which is also important. Now we had a generation far ahead, just belt-wise, of course.
Don't write me off yet.
Beautiful.
And the other generation far back. How about the middle? What keeps you going?
Well, I think almost everything has been said. Technically, when it comes to the art, I love the fact that it's like a master key for different other arts also. Because I trained Muay Thai, I trained Jiu-Jitsu, but I had the feeling, thanks to Kenpo, I understood better how they work. It's like a master key. It's so universal because it teaches principles and mechanics, which always helped me understand other arts better. And somehow, I can't stop. I love this art. And of course, the camaraderie aspect and the family, that's a different thing. Like-minded people around me who strive to get better, who support others and support each other. This is what I love the most, I would say. Moments off the mat create memories that we will never forget. I think this is what it's all about in life.
Yep.
Well, you can't stop because stopping is wrong, I guess.
Exactly. But why is it wrong? It's true. It's so true.
Yeah. Something I want to add real fast before we wrap up. So Mr. Planas used to always say, you judge everything based on what you know. Mm-hmm. So what's good for you as a white belt or an orange belt, and then you get to green belt, and you say, oh, now I know something else. So now all of a sudden you have different favorite techniques and different moves that you like. Now you've learned how to do certain things better, and you learn certain, through trial and error, from time, experience, and logic, that what you thought was good is not as good as something else, and you've learned what's there better. And then next time you get to a different stage, it's important that you reevaluate, like you said, and you do a fresh assessment and move on and, use that past knowledge to grow. this is one thing that Mr. Parker used to say. He had a saying that Kenpo does not change, but it perpetually refines itself. And I find that this is a little bit of a misunderstood saying, because a lot of people think you have to change the way you do five swords, or add a move to short three, or change the order around, or do it against the jab punch. And that alone is the refinement. And the refinement is individual in each of us. As you grow in the art, as your knowledge, physical knowledge of being able to execute the basics grows, and mental knowledge of the art, the scholar grows, and you start understanding more about the art. You perpetually refine in the art, and your execution and understanding and execution of Kenpo grows. And with each year, each level, that's why time is a requirement for rank. It's not the only requirement. That's important to understand as well, because a lot of people think it's just time, but it's what you do with that time. If you just get promoted and sit for 5 years and never think about Kenpo, never teach it, never explore it, never look at new avenues, never pressure test it, against, different attacks or different arts or different aspects, you're not going to grow. So the perpetual refinement is not which version of Kenpo you have and, how they do five swords. Understanding that you can do it any which way based on the situation, that spontaneity is the ultimate goal of Kenpo. And that's what you're striving. And the perpetual refinement is not how your instructor teaches you the system, but how he makes you understand it. And going back to what I started about Mr. Planas, making you understand the system for yourself so you can ingrain it and you can grow from within, not from without. Because it's, once the teacher is gone, you stop learning. Mr. Parker used to always say, I want my students to be self-correcting. I want them to understand the principles so they can grow and correct themselves as they get, higher up in the art. And that's very important, so that's why, again, going back to recap everything, qualified instruction and being sincere about it and learning and understanding the art, it'll serve you tenfold, not only in Kenpo, but in other martial arts and in life as well, because it'll teach you things. It'll teach you how to analyze things. It'll teach you how to scrutinize things and grow in life. And, Kenpo has certainly done that for me. When I teach even, in the restaurant, sometimes they say, oh, you're systematic. You explain, this is this group. And I said, yeah, because we categorize everything in martial arts when I teach it. So I like to do the same thing. This is the cutting techniques. This is this technique. So you organize it, and it's easier for people to learn than if you just bounce all around and say, yeah, this guy is a good cook, but, try to learn it from him. Good luck, And that happens sometimes. You have a phenomenal martial artist that are not the best teachers. They can beat the hell out of somebody, but they couldn't tell you why they did that. And then you have people, ultimately, you kind of, and that's what makes a special, good instructor special, because they have to know both. They have to know how to do it, but they also know very well how to teach it. And that's going back, what made Mr. Planas such a unique individual is that he had both of these aspects. When he did a move on you, he never tried to hurt you. He never tried to impress you with speed or flair or pizzazz, but when he did it, you knew that he, if he wanted to, he would be hurt. But at the same time, when he spoke, that knowledge was always oozing and permeating in every word. So I think that's what I have for the, kind of for the topic,
I think that was some beautiful last words. Got to do another episode next time you're here.
Yes.
Sifu, if you hear us, we love you. I think he's here.
I think he knows, yes.
He knows, and thank you guys for having this conversation.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to do. And always great.
We're looking forward to a good and beautiful weekend of Kenpo.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.